Hello, everyone. It is an immense pleasure and a great honor to see you all gathered here in so large number this morning. Today, we are very glad to welcome Thomas Buberl for our inauguration of the 2018-2019 season of HEC Débats. I know you are all absolutely passionate about insurance, that you all want to do a 40-year career in insurance, but still, I'm still very happy to see you here in so large numbers this morning. Before we start, please let me say a few words about my student society, HEC Débats, which is host of today's conference. HEC Débats organizes and animates conferences held both in French and in English all year long on campus. Among our past guests rank state presidents, CEOs of the CAC 40, philosophers, activists, leading journalists, and many more. Hopefully, you will be hearing much more from us this year. For the very first time in its history, HEC Débats takes part to the Welcome Week of HEC's new students. This way, we can give you a glimpse of all the events you will be able to assist and to participate to on campus during your days at HEC. Thank you, Thomas Buberl, for accepting our invitation and for honoring us of your presence. Thank you for having come here all the way to HEC to share with us your experience, your wisdom, and your world vision with us this morning. My warmest thanks go as well to the AXA teams with whom we've worked closely all summer to prepare this event. I'd like as well to thank all the administration of HEC, going from back office to logistics for making this event possible. I'd like to thank as well, and it's had a very important role, the headship of HEC, which enabled us to hold this conference today. I wish you a lot of success during your days at HEC, and most importantly, an excellent conference. Thank you.
Thomas Buberl, first of all, the whole HEC Débats team wants to thank you for coming today to share with us your experience and your career. AXA is the largest insurance firm with $6.2 billion of net sales in 2017 and a turnover of almost $100 billion. Mr. Buberl, you have been the CEO of this firm since 2016, only 4 years after entering this firm. To understand how you became the youngest leader of a CAC 40 firm, let's first take a look at your academics. After a degree in economics and international affairs in Germany, you obtained an MBA in England and a PhD in Switzerland. But there's something more that explains how you succeeded in this French company. You know how to speak French thanks to a 6-month study in the University of Dauphine, and you also dress up in a quite elegant way for a German. One would say that you have the French touch, basically. That's for the bright side of your success. But it can even become frighteningly impressive from time to time for young students like us. First, in 2000, you entered the BCG, where you decided to learn everything about insurance. Seriously, who does that during his free time? Secondly, you have been nominated as a Young Global Leader in Davos in 2008, even before entering AXA. At this time, you were only 35. Let's be honest, what I hope to get at 35 is the keys of my own car. Thirdly, you entered in AXA in 2012, where you spent only 4 years to become its CEO, taking over French businessman Henri de Castres. Well, anyway, we are extremely lucky to have you here. Of course, we don't all aspire in this room to become CEOs of multinational companies in our 40s. But I'm sure you can inspire all of us here in at least 2 ways. First, we look up to your profuse soft skills, because as almost everything in your career, they're impressive. Comprehension, curiosity, ability to always question yourself, etc. For instance, who in the world could think a CEO in insurance organizes external meetings to learn outside. For your partner, sure, but even from your clients. To be honest, seen from the outside, an insurance company that truly cares for its clients is already a revolution. The second and maybe more important thing we can learn from you is your vision, and you do have one. In its current state, insurance will be outdated in a few decades. Indeed, today, the legacy insurance world has to deal with web comparators and new competitors such as the FANG firms. But your accession to this post underlines what can be called a new era for AXA. You think that by using these new technologies as partners and not competitors, AXA can stay ahead of the market's evolution for the next decades. That's why you think that AXA can partner with the newcomers of the insurance sector. That's also why you consider the client relations as a major stake, because you actually think that clients and AXA can create a real community of partners where clients and AXA work hand in hand with big data to build better insurance products. If I was to sum up this vision of yours, I would say that according to you, in this very competitive sector, everyone can partner up. Of two things, one, either you're a lunatic, either you're a man who's daring to face serious challenges. You precisely said in 2016 that the most meaningful word for you as a multinationals leader was indeed challenge. That's why we're so glad to have you here at HEC with us, because we enjoy learning outside with inspiring leaders like you, as much as learning to dare, as you're doing in AXA. Thank you.
Merci Priyan et bonjour à tous. Je suis extrêmement heureux d'être parmi vous et ça me rappelle de mes propres études qui datent déjà longtemps, mais mes études ont été toujours très très intéressantes parce que c'était une phase dans ma vie de grande liberté, de grand apprentissage et aussi de grandes découvertes. J'étais, comme vous avez dit, à Dauphine à l'époque et je me rappelle et je me souviens très très bien de ces 6 mois et ces 6 mois sont aujourd'hui très importants pour moi parce que c'était la période où j'ai appris mon français. Je suis aussi très heureux que AXA a eu un partnership avec HEC qui date de long terme. On a créé avec HEC des MOOC, on est en collaboration sur 2 chaires, donc un c'est sur les sujets digitales. Et si vous regardez chez AXA, il y a beaucoup de gens d'HEC. On a, si je ne me trompe pas, entre 150 personnes qui viennent d'ici. Mon prédécesseur était HEC, mon président est HEC. Ça veut dire que vous avez une longue carrière devant vous. Et les gens d'HEC sont très très polyvalents. On les trouve partout. Et ça, c'est un atout qui est très très important. J'étais juste avec Peter Toth, avec qui je partage beaucoup, parce qu'on parle beaucoup aussi sur les nouveaux aspects de partenariat AXA-HEC. Et nous sommes aussi 2 oiseaux étrangers, parce que c'est les 2 étrangers qui sont à la tête des belles institutions françaises. Et on est rare, mais j'espère qu'on a encore plus des étrangers en France dans le temps. Et pour vous, chères étudiantes et chers étudiants, la question était là, assurance, qu'est-ce que c'est? Est-ce qu'il y a un jour où vous touchez l'assurance? Et je suis sûr que dans le futur, on se rend compte encore une fois. Soit vous décidez d'être entrepreneur, vous cherchez peut-être à détruire notre business, vous cherchez peut-être un financement, et on est très actif dans le financement des startups. Soit vous décidez de joindre une organisation plus classique, peut-être même AXA, Mais même là, comme l'assureur le plus grand du monde dans le domaine des entreprises, je suis sûr qu'on se raconte. Ou même si vous décidez d'être artiste ou producteur de vin, je suis sûr qu'on se voit aussi parce qu'on est aussi le plus grand assureur des arts et on est un grand producteur des vins. Je suis comme vous rentré hier, après une belle phase de vacances, et cette phase de vacances est toujours extrêmement bien. And now I will switch to English, because I'm sorry, I realize that many people of you do not yet speak French. Keep trying, it's not easy, but you'll get there at some point. When I came back from holiday yesterday and got back into the machine of the daily business, I was thinking, what have I really thought about in those holidays? What have I used the time for to really step back? To step back, to get perspective, and to see the world again from a very different angle without being in the daily machine. And there are some events, certainly this summer, that have marked me a lot. Marked me a lot because they were so different to what I have experienced in the past. Think about all the debates in the commercial fight between the US and China. Think about all the debate and the lack of solutions in the European migrant crisis. And something that is closer, obviously, to my heart, which is climate. Think about all these events that we have seen. Record temperatures in Northern Europe, fires in Greece, and so on. You can ask yourself, what is the linkage between those events? And there is one linkage, despite the fact that they are not linked from a content perspective. All of them are marked by a very new and very sad dimension. Those problems, those challenges, are all by definition global. But when you look, is there today an approach of solving them globally? We have to draw the sad conclusion that global solution is not on the order of the day. And obviously we cannot find to really get together. Everywhere where you look, what has been a given, what has been fought for a long time, certainly in my generation, which is international collaboration, is falling apart every day. What are we going to do? And where does it come from? There is multiple reasons. And for me, there's a couple that drive it where we need to pay a lot of attention. The first one to my mind is the question of rising inequality. We see that financial markets, and however the population benefits from these great financial markets that we have seen, and certainly in summer, you've seen record financial markets in the US, but what has really arrived at the average consumer? How has the average consumer participated in those rise of the financial markets, which also means a rise in our own wealth? And we have to state that they have not participated. That most of the productivity gains of the last years have not gone to the employees, they have gone to the shareholders. And there is always a question of balance. Today, we are out of balance and we need to get back into balance. A second phenomenon that you see is that nation states are less and less capable of developing a vision for their own country, not even speaking beyond their country. When you look today, in France is one of the very few examples where we have a very clear vision. But if I go into my home country, I do not see it? Why should I engage as a citizen? What is the vision of the country? What is the long-term goal? You don't see a lot of it. And the inability of states, of politicians, to really assemble around a common good, a common vision, will really drive further our problems. And at the same time, those states need to deal with the problems of the past. Debt levels have never been that high. Social security burdens have never been that high. We have not resolved the problems of the past yet, despite the fact that we had excellent 10 years to solve them, and we have not even thought about how to create a new vision for our people going forward. And this, combined with the fact that the technological change is so fast that we can hardly follow it. We are not in the times of the agricultural revolution anymore, where it took 100 years to see the change. We are also not in the time of industrial revolution, where it took 50 years, or the service revolution, where it took 30 years. This technological revolution happens as we speak, and we don't grasp yet what it means. However, when we try to understand it, all we paint is a negative picture. Automation will kill jobs. Automation will even amplify the problem of rising inequality. We never talk about the question, where are the opportunities? And I do believe in this world of retreat, in this world of protectionism, there is a big role for all of us to play, which is to do exactly the opposite. We've all grown up in a world that was open. We keep it and we take it as a given. This world is about to be destroyed. It is up to us to make sure that it doesn't happen. And I'm a very convinced European. As you quoted, I lived in many European countries. I have been able to benefit from this European dream. And I can tell you it is something that I would never want to let go. So we all together need to fight hard that this dream does exist in the future, and that this dream has a vision also in the future. In doing so, we must not always point our fingers towards the politician. That is always very easy. We need to take responsibility ourselves. And at the head of a company, for you soon in companies, whether they are your own, whether you are employed, you have the levers to act. You have the levers to think, what can you do for society? Where can you contribute so that there will be a better, a more open, and a more global world tomorrow? You are these leaders of tomorrow, and it is you with whom we need together tackle the societal problems and solve it. What does insurance have to do with all of this? Because you can say, look, where is insurance? How can insurance play a role? And I do believe insurance can play a very big role. Because when you think about what are people worried about, where are the problems, it is mostly around new risks, and it is also around the non-sustainability of our existing systems, notably the social systems. If you think about health insurance, having health costs rising 3 times as much as the GDP is not a sustainable situation. And if you also discover that this rising health cost is often due to inefficiency, we can act. And so I believe for an insurance company in particular, there is a new golden age of insurance which opens up, where are new fields where we can really help and contribute to the well-being of society even more. Think about climate change. I spoke earlier about a couple events. There is many, many more. As an insurer, every morning you look at the weather when you get up. That's the first thing you do. What are the hurricanes that are coming? Where are the floods coming? Where is it too warm? Today, we find ourselves in a situation that 100 billion of protection gap exists. 100 billion of risks are not covered. And we can see that those risks are coming more and more. So where can the private sector help? And this is not only in the question of how can we insure, it is also in the question how can we avoid investing into technologies that do contribute to these climate changes. And we were the first ones to step back and to divest from coal. This was a tough decision because my investment people were yelling at me and saying, hey, look, if you withdraw, we will not have this excellent income anymore because most of those sectors produce a very good yield. I said, I don't care. Because if we can avoid damage to society of tomorrow, we need to stop these investments and we need to shift our investments towards green energy because this is where the future will be. Health. I was talking earlier about the explosion of the health cost. We see many, many companies around us working in the alimentation space to change and to really be more responsible. We can do the same. We insure many, many people today against their health risks. What are we doing? We are paying their claims. We could do much more. We could help them in their daily life of how to maneuver through the jungle of health, finding the right doctor quickly. 2 years ago, we launched a very, very new service of teleconsultation, first in France and internationally. We started with 0 customers. Today, we have 10 million customers. And it's an amazing convenience for these people. It is not so difficult to help and to find solutions. Or think about new technology and cyber. Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is fearing it. Nobody is sharing what has actually happened. But when you look behind, you see already massive damages. How can we help? By securing from the outside, by educating the employees that phishing mails are not a good thing to open, and how can we certainly help once something has happened to clean up quickly. There are many solutions that we can provide. New way of working. Think about all these Uber drivers that are driving around there that have no social security because their way of working is today not covered by social security. We were the first ones to go out there and to help Uber to find a solution. We didn't have all the data. We couldn't look back on a history of 100 years that our actuaries like. We took a risk of providing a solution for their benefit so that these drivers can have a social coverage. Or when you look at emerging customers, very far away from us in India, we have many people that are struggling, and in particular many women that make sure that families survive. They are the driving force of the business. They have $2 to $10 every day, not like what we have. And if those entrepreneur women are ill, can't work a day, it means that there is no bread on the table tomorrow. How can we help? How can we secure their land? How can we secure their earnings in the agricultural space? How can we help them to get out of poverty is an extremely noble and extremely gratifying task. So insurance is in the middle of it, and insurance can really help to provide. And your view of insurance, we are paying claims, we are often not satisfying our customers, is a very old view. The insurance of tomorrow is very much around empowering people to live a better life. help people to avoid claims, accompanying people in their life. And this is a very different task to what we have done in the past. In order to get there, we need you. We need talents, we need entrepreneurial spirit, and we need very different leaders relative to the past. Because all of us are faced with a transformation that none of us has ever done. I cannot go to my predecessor and ask how they've done it 40 years ago, because the situation is very different. We have to sort it out ourselves. And in order to sort it out, to my mind, there are two attributes that are extremely important. The one is be entrepreneurial, try things, and I'll come to it what it means. And try something based on convictions. The second one is very much about learning. We can only transform our companies if we transform ourselves. And transforming ourselves means being open, means learning, means challenging yourself every day. And when you think, what does a leader need to really be successful going forward? It starts with something very simple, very natural, but something in effect very difficult. You need to have an extremely strong conviction of your business, rooted in society. If you do not and cannot develop a vision together with your employees, together with your colleagues, where your strategy and the good of society go together, you will not succeed. And this is not easy. What does it mean in insurance? In insurance, it means we have to go away from just paying bills, from being a payer of bills, to becoming a partner of our customer, which means we need to interact far more often with our customer, and we need to make sure that the payment of the claim becomes the exception and not the norm. This is a fundamental shift of the model, but very, very focused on how can we help society. A second important topic is, it makes no sense if you are the master of that vision and nobody else knows about it or cares about it. Engaging your people, creating the energy in your teams for that vision is something extremely important. And I probably spend most of my time in this area, because I do believe that the alignment of teams, the leverage in an organization, is what keeps the machine going, what keeps a company moving. And working on this leverage, helping the transformation to go, that's for me the most important thing. And I have many, many circles. My immediate team, we have the top 40, but we even go as far as reuniting the top 800. We've done it this year, not only to talk about content, but also to feel our engagement in society. We, for example, took one day to clean a forest nearby so that animals have better routes to get to water and their food. And when you do something very different, when you get out of your zone of comfort, it is there where you meet the people truly, where the facade of the business is finally falling down, and where you get to the human core of a person. Together with this, your focus should be on the long term. It makes no sense to be addicted to the drug of the short-termism of the markets and lose sight of the long term. At AXA, we have clearly decided to move away from financial risks to go more into commercial risks, which meant that we had to do a significant transformation of our portfolio. Some of you might remember, on the 5th of March of this year, we announced a very large acquisition, 15 billion. On the same day, the share price dropped by 10%. These are those moments when you feel the heat, when you are all alone, nobody's with you, and you have to defend the long term versus the short term against a falling market. But having conviction, having a leadership team behind you helps you to get through it. And in this world of transformation, it is all about bias to action. In insurance, we've got the tendency to be 120% certain before we decide to do something. This is too late. By the time that we have reached 120%, our new competitors have already stolen the business from us. We need to be faster, and 80% is good enough. However, to innovate, to change, it also means changing the company in its composition of people. Having the same people everywhere makes no sense, because you cannot get to a very diverse and a very innovative solution. And therefore, the astonishment 2 years ago, how could AXA choose a young German to be the next CEO, a French jewel to be headed by a foreigner, was exactly the very clear sign for the public, but also for myself. The board has taken a large step forward, a risk on you, Thomas. It is the carte blanche for you to do the same to AXA, make it more international and make it more diverse. And we've taken a very conscious decision to push gender equality a lot. Today, 30% of our top leaders are already female, and we have clearly said beyond 2020 we want to go to parity. And if we don't do anything ourselves and let just the demographic evolution work, we will have gender parity only by 2060. That is certainly too late for me. But diversity is also about generational diversity. What can we do to understand each other? Because generations work very differently. And I do believe that this generational diversity is probably an even bigger challenge than the diversity across gender. In order to succeed the transformation, we need to be humble, we need to learn. You mentioned it. I was very, very struck once when I was reading a religious rule of Saint Benoit, who said, go to the people you expect nothing from. Your expectations can only be exceeded. And this is also the wisdom I would like to leave for you. Learning happens outside this room. Learning happens outside these communities of students. Learning happens where you don't expect it to happen. When you go to India, when you speak to artists, when you speak to people that you normally don't meet, it is where you exit your comfort zone, it is where you extend your horizon, and it is where you learn very different things. And I can only encourage you. You are young, you are mobile, you are healthy. If there's one thing I would love you to do is experiencing the world. You need all of this for tomorrow. And I'm very glad to see so many students, to see so much energy in this room to tackle the challenges of tomorrow. Those challenges are not only negative. There is a lot of upside in those challenges, but it needs us to find the challenge, and it needs your readiness, your entrepreneurial spirit, your willingness to learn to tackle these challenges. I wish you all the best, wish you good luck, and certainly wish you a lot of courage and curiosity on your way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buberl, for this very inspiring and insightful speech. This is how the conference is now going to take place. First, we will have an interview led by Mathias and Aurel, a 1 hour long interview. And then we'll have a 40-minute interactive talk with you, the public, where you will be able to ask all your questions to Thomas Buberl. So if you have any questions, please write them down or keep them in mind, because you'll be able to ask all of them at the end of the interview. Thank you very much and very good conference. I'd like as well to thank our sponsors, le Journal des Grandes Écoles, le Figaro Économie, le cabinet de conseil et d'audit Mazars, la Caisse d'épargne, and the Champagne Bilkar Salman. Thank you very much.
Merci Simon. Thank you, Mr. Buberl, for this insightful and inspiring speech. We'll come back to most of what you just talked about, but first I want to talk a little bit more about you. If you had to describe your journey to become the CEO of AXA Group in 3 steps, which would they be? In other words, how did a young German leader become the CEO of a French multinational?
The honest answer is I don't know. And this is a very structural question, and I will give a very unstructured answer. This succession process was a very organized process. Henri de Castres, who was my predecessor, was at the head of AXA for 17 years. And he's a very visionary guy, and he has, as one of the few, understood that the human element and finding his right successor is the absolute most important task to leave your legacy. And he started a journey with the board and 7 candidates at the time, a 3-year journey on the succession process. And so I was number 7 of 7. I was the youngest, I wasn't French, and I was, as you said earlier, the shortest in AXA. So at the very beginning I thought, you have no chance, enjoy the ride. And so there was a process that was quite a tough process. It started slowly. It then became very tough because it went inside you. At some point we were asked to write a book about ourselves. Who are you? What is your vision for AXA? And how do you implement it? Those questions sound easy on the surface, but they are very difficult when you certainly have to write about yourself and when you discover yourself. Having gone through the process and having understood later what the board was looking for, there were a couple of things that they were looking for which were not so evident for me in the process, so it was difficult to influence the process. One was the question of resilience. Can you withstand difficult times? And I had to say, I didn't have the biggest track record on that because I was young, and so far many things have gone well. But I can tell you something, on that famous 5th of March that I mentioned earlier, I got my lesson of resilience. The second one was very much around reinventing yourself. Having all the pedigree of running a big organization was the given for everybody. But to reinvent yourself, in order to reinvent AXA, this was the one thing that the board looked out for. And there was a third one, which was very much around federating and creating a team. Because the board, and I as well, believe that in those difficult times, there is not 1 or 2 people who have the solution. The solution comes from the crowd. And leveraging the wisdom of the crowd means you need to give the power to the people.
About this crowd, about this French crowd you discovered when you came to France, was it a shock for a German businessman like you are? Did you feel like there was a French culture of business? And do you also think that it is to be promoted to attract the new talents you talked about earlier in your speech, to develop AXA more, or do you need to tone this French personality in business now?
So obviously it was not easy at the beginning, and many people told me, look, this will be so difficult, you will fail very quickly. And I wanted to prove the opposite. And because it was bizarre, I mean, I had no understanding of French society. I remember one moment when I was sitting in the board, and there were people that came from one of your competitors, ENA, on one side, and on the other side, there were people from another competitor, les X-Mines. The French will know what that means, and those people were not talking to each other, and I never understood, why don't you talk to each other? And so I had to learn all of this, but it also required from myself a large integration into France. The learning element, the curiosity element, I cannot demand to the French to absorb me and accept me if I'm not open to it. So I made a big effort to really dive into the ins and outs of French society. And I must say it was a fantastic travel and a fantastic experience which continues every day. And AXA being French or non-French, the answer is probably yes and no. We are French. We are very proud of our French roots. And I personally, I speak, most of my day, I speak French. I don't speak English. And so it's important to keep the French roots because they have built us, they have made us very proud. But I think what's even more important with AXA is the entrepreneurial history behind it. I just looked into the book of all the speakers, and I think about 30 years ago, my predecessor, Claude Bébéard, also spoke here. He was the one who took a small mutual in Rouen, in the north of France, and built it out into the largest insurer of this world. And this entrepreneurial history and how we got there is probably the biggest inspiration for us going forward to get back to it, because quite honestly, when you grow, when you get big, you also get a bit too bureaucratic. It is those roots, how can we get back to the entrepreneurship that probably weigh even more than being French or not being French. And today, we are French and international. So if you look on my team, out of 10 people, only 4 are French. But they are not being chosen because they had a French passport. They were chosen because they are great people. And so the team is very mixed. You have a Scotsman in there, you have 2 Americans, you have 2 Germans, you have 1 Swiss guy. It's very mixed, but that's what makes it interesting and also what makes it different.
You're not the only foreign CEO of a French big company. Recently, Benjamin Smith was nominated at the head of Air France KLM. Before you, Peter Todd became our dean. He's Canadian also. Why do you think that French companies are seeking foreign leadership? And do you think this is a trend in Europe?
Look, when you talk about French companies, what does it actually mean? These companies happen to be based in France, but they are very international. I mean, if you take AXA, AXA has a very large French organization, but it contributes 20% to the overall of AXA. So 80% is outside of France. This is a truly international company. If you look at all the other large CAC 40, you will find very much a similar profile. And so the question is very much, how can we cater for an international company being based in France? And I do believe that going forward, it would be good to have more foreign CEOs, but those foreign CEOs need to have a strong desire to also integrate in France, because you have to always play the two. If you take AXA, we are very involved in what's going on in France, be it on the political scene, be it in the health sector. If you come and want to speak English to the ministers, it's not a good idea. So you need to, get into the society and always play the two, your French leg and your international leg.
So maybe now we're gonna let you learn about the fact that you're German It's nothing to be ashamed of, after all.
I hope not. But I'm glad I hear that I become more French, certainly when it comes to the dressing.
You do. But on a more individual point of view, we will talk about your management style, and you do have one, and you're often questioned about how much of a challenge it was for you to adapt to this French multinational, that is AXA, the AXA group. But I'd like to know too how much of a challenge it was for AXA to adapt to your new management style, a way more innovative, entrepreneurial style. And is it difficult for you to move such a big structures, a so-called legacy structure, that is often depicted as reluctant to change?
So no doubt it was and it is difficult, and it is a challenge every day. And it's the same when you do sports. When you are not used to it, sometimes you love to sit down and relax and can't get up anymore. And that's why it's the same by transforming a company. And taking over AXA was, in that respect, a very big challenge, because we were doing extremely well. We are still doing extremely well. If you look at our mid-year results, we had record high profits. So to advocate for change is extremely difficult, because people say, hey, look, things are going well. Why should we change? What is important is, coming back to what I said earlier, is to create a long-term vision that really energizes people. And what we did is to really start there. So in my first 2 weeks, we did workshops, and in particular with the young crowd, to really think about what is our purpose, what do we stand for, what makes us tick every morning, what makes us happily come to work. And this was that vision: how can we really empower people to live a better life? How can we move from just being a payer to being a partner? And this was also linked to very strong values that we have in the company. Values that are based on our successful past, such as courage, such as integrity, but also values that look very much in the future. Customer first and One AXA. And all of this together, we spent a tremendous amount of time engaging people, letting people explain, letting people experience themselves, also with then a large change of the organization. We went from a very central, very controlled model into a very decentral model, which we call freedom within boundaries. We delegated a lot of things to the local entities, always respecting the regulatory boundaries. But the philosophy came very much from, if we employ somebody locally, we trust him or her, and if we trust him or her, they are capable of doing and getting to a good solution, and we don't need to control or do their work again centrally. And all of this combined has created a very strong alignment. And when you go into AXA in all the 64 countries, you will see those values everywhere, created lots of energy, and this freedom locally has really engaged people. But it needs continuous engagement, talking, discussing, engaging, clarifying. The change of an organization is not at all done once you finish your strategy paper. You might have done 10% of your journey.
But in order to keep inspiring those people and keeping them interested, you have made it a priority to reorganize the classical pyramidal shape of the firm. And the most symbolic example for this is the round table that you can see here or here, as opposed to rectangular shaped, which means to bring down hierarchy, and that is where you hold meetings in AXA's headquarters. Can you tell us why it is so important for you to make these changes, and what difficulties did you face when you started implementing these? So
this round table is true. It's also my office, by the way. I have no desk anymore, so I work there and I have meetings there. But this round table for me is a symbol of equality. I don't at all believe in hierarchies. again, coming back to what I said earlier, we are all facing a tremendous challenge, a challenge that we need to invent ourselves, that transformation that we need to invent ourselves, where we cannot look into textbooks. And the only way we can do it is by finding the solution together, by giving the power to those people who can help you to find the solution, and also by showing vulnerability at the very beginning that you don't have the solution, that the solution will be created around this table. And for me, this is extremely important to have this non-hierarchical space and also to multiply this when we visit the companies. We have town hall meetings, we don't have presentations, we only have discussions. Everybody can ask what he or she wants. Everybody can challenge, and challenge is inherent. And coming back to your earlier question, this challenge was very difficult. It was a challenge for the company, but it was also a challenge for me because I didn't know, am I on the right track or not? But when you have a very strong conviction, you need to follow it, and you need to continue challenging, because by questioning ourselves every day, it is only there where you renew yourself, where you rethink yourself, where you reinvent yourself every day, and that's what makes the pleasure of our development. Your learning does not finish when you leave this university. Your learning starts when you have left this university.
About this method, this management style with less hierarchy, I would like to maybe apply this to the main themes of your vision for AXA to understand more why you're doing this. And if we try to sum it up, this vision you have for this insurance firm, there are 3 topics that are at the base of it for AXA. First, redefine your portfolio, balance it. Secondly, revolutionize the way we see insurance with big data and new tech. And thirdly, and maybe more importantly even, improve the relation you have with your clients. And we're gonna talk first about your portfolio, and this is linked to this question of listening to the collective intelligence inside AXA, because AXA is known as for its insurance activities, but also as an asset manager with its subsidiary AXA Bank, and you decided to tone the importance of this asset manager part down. For example, by acquiring, as you said, the Excel Group. And so that's your long-term vision, focusing on the core of insurance for the future. But if you had listened to the collective intelligence inside AXA, maybe you wouldn't have done that, because there was much skepticism, even inside your troops, not only in the market, on the financial market. So is it your role as a leader, as a top manager, to listen to the collective intelligence, but also to be ahead of it and to see more long-term further?
Yes. So the listening part is nevertheless a very important part, because by listening, by challenging, you get all the arguments on the table. It doesn't mean that the collective group will take the decision. You have to take the decision as a leader, and if it goes wrong, you are the responsible. And so nobody takes the decision away from you. And you have to take the decision on a very grounded and long-term basis. And so coming back to this topic about shifting the portfolio, just to show you the magnitude, we are today, or we used to be, 70% a life and savings company. So very much focused on life and savings asset management. With all these moves, we will switch to 70% being a property and casualty company. Why did we do that? Because when you look at the insurance market from far, what do you see? You see new competitors coming and margins compressing, certainly in the retail space. You have large banks taking the market off the life and savings space. You have car manufacturers taking your motor business. What is not at all attacked is the commercial space, the insuring SMEs, insuring large companies, where you need a very, very high degree of expertise, and it's also there where all the new risks are coming up. So this was our spot of growth. And the second area is the health space. More and more health is demanded. It's a growing space. And both places have an insustainability in a way that the costs are rising so much that insurance is the only place and the only actor in alignment with the customer's interest to help to get the expenses down, to get the risks down, and to go beyond the insurance coverage and manage risks and help people to avoid the claim. So that was the only space which gave us growth and which gives us also contact to the customer. And we are the only insurer who does that in such a drastic way. But when you look, there is not so many ways of changing your portfolio on a global space. If I had to redo what we've done up to now, it would not be possible anymore. There is not a second XL. Excuse me. There is not a financial market anymore that is in the same condition. So sometimes you have to follow your convictions and you have to look at it long term, and you certainly have to engage your board on it and get your board behind you, because it is them that you decide the strategy with and your team for the long term.
I'd like to talk about another more external challenge for you and for AXA. The same way fintechs have disrupted the banking system in the past 10 years, now insurtechs are arriving to the market, such as Lemonade in the US, with more digitalization, big data, and of course extremely targeted product concepts such as on-demand hourly auto insurance. And I would like to know how AXA plans to position itself. Will it adapt to limit those threats? Will it partner with some of these new insurtechs that are arriving to the market? Or will it keep the same corporate structure as before and rely on its customer base?
So it is true that we have many new competitors, and personally I welcome those new competitors, because that is one way of waking up the traditional companies. Those competitors have been very active, in particular on the front end and in the customer relationship, and I do believe that they have created something very unique that we don't have yet. However, if you look, have they really disrupted the whole insurance space? No. And many of those attacks and attempts have also failed. If you look, Google wanted to create a comparison website and then decided that it's too difficult and stopped it again. So it's not so easy, and insurance is a very regulated business, which often creates a very high barrier of entry. So my and our conviction is very much to say, let's not fight with those startups. Let's create a partnership and let's really work together with them. And so with Lemonade, with Oscar, with Zongan, we are all working together. And we are probably the most digital insurer today. And the way you can do it is twofold. One is you need to transform your existing entities to digitalize them, which means that you have to obviously work on how do you automate the workflow, how do you make it more customer friendly, but in particular, how do you enable your distribution to benefit from the new digital means? And that requires significant investment and also education. And the second leg that we built is an innovation area that is completely apart from the traditional organization, where we very much focus on the health business, the secondary health business. So how can we help with digital solutions to really fight the explosion of the health cost? Very, very innovative partnerships. I mentioned Uber earlier. We have another partnership with ING. And so those are apart, but not in competition with the existing business, because they are businesses that are very, very different. And we have others in the pipeline that could potentially be extremely interesting. And it is also there where you attract the talents. Young talents come to work in this area because they can obviously be extremely entrepreneurial. But young talents also come for the traditional entities because they can transform. we sit on piles of data that we don't use. Google and Facebook would love to have that data. And many of the people that have come from the new economy have not left us. They stayed because they see the potential. And we need those talents to challenge us and to help us to transform.
Talking about Uber, as you just said before in your speech, another challenge is, of course, the sharing economy. You said yourself, referring to Uber in an interview, that it was the golden age for insurance. Could you care to explain a little bit more about what you meant and how you're planning on dealing with the new sharing economy firms such as Uber, Airbnb, BlaBlaCar? Of course, you already have a partnership with Uber, but are you planning to go further and becoming the sole insurer for these types of firms?
I would love to. No, definitely. I mean, this is an area that is on the verge of developing, and it is always the same starting base. You are dealing with new risks that we have not insured beforehand. You are dealing with a partner that is by definition global. So Uber doesn't say, oh, I want one insurer for France, one for Germany, one for Japan. They say, look, I want one solution across the entire world. And it is also a solution that is not clear from the beginning. You need to create it together. And to give you an example on Uber, the key topic was, how can we cover passengers on the rides? How can we cover the drivers where there is no social protection? It's a very difficult task. And we are going further. Or BlaBlaCar, that we also work with, there was a question, how can we create a very innovative car insurance? And today, you have to fill in all these questionnaires to get your price. In BlaBlaCar, we do it differently. The passenger rates the driver. And based on the rating after the journey, the insurance premiums vary. And what's quite interesting to see is that we don't like that risk of very large car fleets because there's always a level of non-responsibility. All of a sudden, with those means, you have a very different means of responsibility. And those concepts, you have to be open, innovative. The solution is not there at the beginning, and you need to co-create. And so, yes, we have many, many more in the pipeline. And fortunately, we are one of the very few ones in this area. And obviously, if you have a track record in them, it is also easier to get the next deal.
Staying on co-creation, how do you plan to scale up this business? Because by definition, you have to adapt each insurance offer to the offer that these sharing economy firms make to the clients. So, as you said, with BlaBlaCar, you have to keep the rating in mind that they give to the drivers. So, with each firm, you have to adapt the offer, and isn't that difficult and unscalable?
Your IT people will always tell you it's difficult. But what we've done in the same time, we've invested in our IT in a very different way to our competitors. So, as you said earlier, insurance is a legacy business. You need to rely on your past. The accidents you might have created 7 years ago, the smashing of the windows with your football 10 years ago, this is very important for us to understand what risk you are. So it's by definition a legacy business, and those systems have become very old. We are still working on host and on languages that I have learned when I studied. And so the biggest topic was always how to renew this architecture. We didn't go this way. We left everything as it is, and we made flexible only the middle layer and the customer interaction. We created APIs that were extremely flexible, and so today, if you want to create a new product, it goes extremely fast, and it's extremely flexible, while having left the backbone almost the same. And so for us, it's not such a big problem, and we have a global company, AXA Partners, who is dealing with it, to adapt those products also as we go along in the partnerships. And that is something that one of my predecessors had a very bright idea and foresight to do it, and we benefit from this today.
So you seem to be on the right path regarding innovation and technical evolution in insurance, but I would like to focus more on the third point, that I talked about, which is customer relations, because it's difficult to know if these evolutions, technical evolutions, will match customers' expectations, even if they maybe need these technical evolutions, because if we could focus on what you mean to do for customers, you mean to shift your relation with them from payer to partner. You said it already. In three ways: by focusing on digital channels, secondly by simplifying and digitalizing some processes for them, some paperwork, etc. And thirdly, by leveraging big data, the data that belongs to your customers. And that's why I ask myself a question, because do you really think clients want their insurance company to be a partner when the only thing they seem to want is to get rid of the paperwork the quickest possible? At least that's what I want to do. And so do you think they are really ready to follow you in these innovations?
So I agree, yes, they have to and they will, and I'll tell you why. And let's take a very concrete example in the health insurance, because that's the most, I think, clear. So it is true today, an insurance company is often seen as a payment institution of claims, and the interactions you have with an insurance company are not very positive ones. It's about paperwork, it's about your frustration that your claim hasn't been properly paid, it's about another agent wanting to sit on your couch in the evening and selling you another insurance. Technology has significantly changed all of this, and it allows us to finally create an alignment of interest with the customer in a way that we change our perspective completely. What is the challenge for the customer? I agree with you that in general you would say, no, I don't want my insurance company to be a partner. But if you are faced with the fact, look, do you still want to be insured for your health tomorrow, or because you can't avoid it anymore, you will not be insured anymore? I think you'd rather take the partner route. And so the partner route means for us to help you beyond the claims payment in prevention. So for example, today on the health side, we work a lot with companies on how to improve your health, more movement, less alcohol, less smoking, on measuring and improving the stress levels. That's the whole prevention part. The second part is the area of care coordination. How do I quickly find a doctor? Assume you are ill at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. If you want to go to a doctor, you have to phone the next morning, you have to wait for 4 days to get an appointment. By then, you are either so bad or your illness has passed. You want to have access to medicine in this moment when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the night. And by telemedicine, by video consultation, you can easily get there. Or take a third piece of chronic diseases. Do you know how painful, how difficult it is for somebody who has got diabetes to always adhere to the treatment, to always see a doctor? It's a pain and it's really uncomfortable. With digital solutions, which for the first time create means of contacts, things will get easier at less cost and a better customer outcome. And it's exactly there where the technology will help us to engage with customers in a very different way and to really help them to lead a better life in full alignment of interest.
So that's the reasonable answer. But I think that's maybe in the market, in the customer's head, there is a lot of fear too sometimes about these new techs and how some multinational companies like AXA can use them. I said it was the data that belongs to your customers, and there is a lot of fear around that. It can even be considered as a breach into privacy. And that's why, more generally, do you think society, the market, but also governments, in France especially, are ready to follow you on these innovations, even if they are rational and maybe useful?
So the data question is a major question, and that's more a philosophical question, because there's one question around having more data and protecting it, which is one part. There's the other question, what do you do with the data? And so on the protecting part of the data, I have got a very simple philosophy. We need to do everything to protect the customer's data, because the customer has trusted us and trusts us to give us the data, and you can only lose your reputation once. And therefore, our ambition is really to be top-notch on this. And we were the very first one to declare very publicly what we do with the data and what we don't do with the data. For example, we are not selling the data. We are not individualizing the data the way Google is doing it. And this was quite revolutionary at the time. We work a lot with the French authorities, the CNIL, for example, to really be best practice. And when you think about GDPR, something that has come into Europe in May this year, we started extremely early, and I really welcome the GDPR, because it is a means also to raise the bar for data protection, not only for us, but also for the ones that don't take it so seriously. The second piece is the question, what do you do with the data? And the biggest danger to my mind is that the traditional mechanism of insurance that creates social cohesion, that creates risk diversion, is being destroyed. We have all this data today. I don't need so much more. But what we do today is iron out. All of us, we are financing the 18-year-old driver because he or she will never be able to pay her true bill or his true bill, and we iron it out. And this is the model of social cohesion. This is the model of risk diversion. If tomorrow you pay exactly your risk, we enter into a situation where some will be covered at a reasonable price, and the majority will either not be covered or will have to pay so much that it's impossible to cover. And I do not believe, given what I said earlier on rising inequality and populism, that any of the states have the slightest interest of moving away from the model of insurance that has worked so well for so many 100 years.
But apart from this data issue, I said that you were a legacy company and so big a firm that it can even become scary for customers. And I asked myself this question because you seem to be to want to be partner up with your customers, but this is not in your brand definition, or not so much until now. These companies exist, the mutual insurance companies like Maif or MAF. So how will clients recognize your company since it evolves so much and so fast? In terms of brand management, I mean.
So I think the mutual character of insurance is everywhere. It relates back to the diversification that I said earlier. The difference between a capital market society and a mutual is the fact, where do you distribute the profits? Do you give it to your shareholders or do you give it to your members? But the principle is the same. When I talk about partnering, I don't mean the classical mutual of sharing the profits. What I mean is to innovate and to create new services outside of the insurance coverage so that we can together with the customer reduce the claim payment. So think about it. I'm destroying our own model. By helping the customer to live a better life, we will help them to have less claims, which also means I get less revenue. So I'm shifting the model to something completely different, which I'm attacking our own model. But I do believe it is more sustainable going forward, and you will see, AXA, how does it look concretely, that we will be in many services around the insurance coverage. I mentioned earlier telemedicine. This is one of the topics where, as I said, started from 0 to 10 million customers. On a Sunday, when I read my email, in the past I often got only complaints, because on Sunday the people have time. They, waited for the final day of the weekend to tell me how awful things are. But what's interesting, for the last year, the Sundays have been much brighter, because I also receive letters from people that have used the telemedicine and said, hey, look, this is amazing. We would have never, ever expected that. And we will go into those services also for companies in cybersecurity when it comes to the future of work, where we will expand our offering beyond the insurance coverage in full alignment with the customer. And I see no reason why the customer should not be ready to partner with us. And coming back to the data is extremely transparent. The data you give to us today, you can call us anytime. By the definition of GDPR, we have to give you all the data. We have to tell you which data we have. So it's extremely transparent. And you rightly said it. The data only belongs to one person, which is the customer. And going forward, this will remain like this.
I'm afraid we only have time for one more question before we give the microphone to the audience. And I'd like to talk about what you just mentioned, the stakeholders, the shareholders. You said earlier that environment is close to your heart. And what I'd like to know is, how is it compatible for students who are seeking for meaning in their lives and in their jobs to work in multinational companies and still have a meaning? You say yourself that you want to take into consideration all stakeholders and not just shareholders. What does this precisely mean to you, and what stakeholders are you listening to?
So, I mean, an insurance business, again, what we talked about earlier, by paying claims, you can say this is a big payments machine. But insurance, at the end of the day, is in the middle of society. We are ensuring social cohesion. We are covering risks, existing risks, new risks. We are ensuring the diversification. And from there, we have a societal role. As an investor, where do we invest? What do we push as new technology, or not push? But also as an insurer. Take the decision of not investing into tobacco anymore. Again, this has cost me a lot of money in terms of yield, but by not investing in tobacco anymore, I can also have less of a problem with cancer from smoking and so on. So I see both sides of the equation. And therefore, engaging people in the company for a common purpose is extremely important. And I learned that from my predecessor, who said to me in the very early stages of my mandate, look, you need to create the North Star for all of AXA. This is what drives your culture, and this is what engages the people. And we've done that at the very beginning. And this notion around empowering people to live a better life and helping people to live a better life has a lot of meaning for us, and certainly for myself, and it keeps me up every day. And you are right, the branding doesn't show it yet, but it will show it soon. Because you need to go through all the elements of your company and see where is the purpose, how can we really implement it. And in order to do it, again, it's difficult to change by yourself. It is a great help of the young generation for us to really push us. But what we've also decided is very early on to create a so-called stakeholder panel. So we have a panel that meets twice a year with external people that, again, come from somewhere where you would not expect any experience for insurance, but that create and give us a richness of experience that is tremendous. And I just recruited a new member yesterday from India, and I was puzzled again. A woman that has nothing to do with insurance, how she looks on the insurance, and how she pushes us to really make changes. And the stakeholder panel has got a very important task to push that agenda of aligning our strategy with our social purpose, and also of creating meaningful progress, because what doesn't get measured will never get done. We speak a lot, but when we want to act and do, we need to measure and walk the talk.
How do you choose the people in that stakeholder panel?
So first of all, no insurer. We said, look, our big topics, our big strategic topics are companies and health. Companies, what are their big risks? Cyber. Their big risks are climate risks. But their big risks are also expansion risks in other countries, in emerging countries. On the health side, you have the biggest challenge of exploding health costs in developed countries, France, Germany, whatever, but also in new countries. So we looked for expertise in those sectors, and then we looked for a very diverse group. So you have a person from every continent, and it's extremely diverse. I think it's even 50-50 on gender, and also very much diverse on the age front. So I think the oldest person is, I think, 70. The youngest person is, I don't know, 28, 29. And it's a wonderful way to see how they interact and how they challenge you. And what I always do, before the stakeholder panel starts, we have a very open session. So I share all my biggest business challenge and people challenges with them and ask them for feedback. And again, the same rule applies. They are not insurance experts, they are not leadership experts. You shouldn't expect anything, but what comes back is absolutely amazing.
Thank you very much. Now, if any of you have questions, you have 40 minutes.
The obvious is obviously not at the agenda. You will get there.
Danke, merci. Thank you for sharing the inspirations and the great initiatives that AXA has taken with us. So you mentioned a lot about the future of AXA, or AXA has done lots of things to empower the future clients and to avoid the claims for them. So could you please explain a bit more on this vision, on this mission, and what are the milestones that AXA is going to take in the future?
So, you're absolutely right. We want to go beyond the insurance claim, and we want to create services and interactions around these insurance claims. And so the milestones will be that in our two areas of focus, commercial line and health, we will deploy and develop services that are also revenue generating, services that are profit generating, with the sole aim of how can we increase the interaction with the customer, so we will measure the interaction, and secondly, how can we help the customer to really lower the risks, because often the risks are generated by not being attentive enough and by not being attentive enough early. So we have developed a very clear, we call it execution roadmap, where we've defined what does payer to partner, so to become from a payer to a partner mean on an operational level for the local entities, but also for the new business that we are creating. And they all have very clear targets in terms of revenue, in terms of customer interactions, and we are now in the process of implementing it. Often, one, and that's also one of my biggest, let's say, weaknesses, is patience. We do believe that things go extremely quickly, that with new businesses, things change overnight. It is not the case. You need to take time, you need to have breath in order to, to change customers' habit and really prove that you become a partner. It will take a long, long time. And therefore, that vision for us is not a vision for the next 2 years or 3 years. It is a vision that goes to 2025 to 2030, and we will need that time to really change the model. The first step was to change our portfolio, to get into core insurance businesses that have a natural customer contact, where there is a positive contact. So companies want to talk to you, the entrepreneur wants to talk to you. How can he or she reduce his or her risk? And the same is true on the health side. It has become more and more difficult to find the right doctor. We've got all this information. Why not share it? Why not give it to the customer? So there is a very clear execution roadmap, but it will take time. And many of your constituency sees, in especially the investors, they often don't have a lot of time.
Thank you.
You know, the easiest is I give you my microphone.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Buberl, for your time. I mean, we heard a couple of times that you're from Germany, so I would like to take the opportunity to ask you a question about Germany, or on Germany and Europe in particular. You mentioned that you believe AXA has some sort of responsibility for the development in our society. You mentioned the environmental aspect. But keeping in mind that we have stronger and stronger movements on the left-wing and right-wing populistic parties in Germany, but also all over Europe, do you think big multinational companies like AXA should take some sort of action? And if yes, how? Because I think this is way harder than just stopping to invest into coal companies or tobacco companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question, which is not an easy one. I do fundamentally believe, as I said earlier, that we should not finger point to the politicians and should say, look, this is your responsibility, you need to solve it. When you look, where do these populistic patterns appear? It is in most places where the state has withdrawn and where there is no vision anymore and no connection to the real world. I saw the other day a very interesting graph in The Economist that was plotting the Front National voters and their distance to the next train station. The further you live away from the train station, the more likely is that you are a member of the Front National. And so that shows you that there is a vacuum, there is nobody there. What are the other structures where people are put together, where people work together, where the state is not active anymore? It is the companies. And so we will have to take more responsibility. We will have to find ourselves in a way that we need to help the state. We need to take our responsibility to get back to social cohesion again. And so when you look, you spoke about Germany, but let's take a very pragmatic example on France. Macron, to my mind, has done a fantastic journey of being courageous with reforms. But the reform does not end at the décret. This is 10% of the journey. The other 90% is the implementation. And in the implementation, the large companies are extremely important. And so for us, we have taken commitments to significantly increase, for example, the apprentices in France. We are already beyond 5% of our staff in apprentices. We want to go even beyond, so we will increase by 30%. We have decided to create a new site in France, despite the fact that in Morocco or wherever it would have been much cheaper, and we want to do it in places that are disadvantaged. So there is ways that companies connect, but again, you need to have the vision, you need to have the conviction, and you need to do it. And I believe that companies can play and need to play a very large role. Yes, as a multinational, you are always suspicious, but this area of how do we work with the state in a different way will become a very big area. Again, going back to the example of health. In France, in Germany, in UK, you have two health systems today. You have the private health system and the public health system. To my mind, the question of who should operate that system is the absolute wrong question. I don't care personally if it's private or it's public. The question is more, how can we work together to reduce the burden of these health costs? And so there will be a very new way of working together with the state. And that could be a very interesting space, but it means that we both need to change our attitude when it comes to working with each other, and also when it comes to the way we work with each other in terms of the structure of those projects. Do we make a profit or not? So yes, we will need to adapt, but only the companies can make sure that things change and can contribute a lot, and we don't take enough responsibility today.
Hello, Mr. Buberl. So in your introductory speech, you explained that one of your greatest focus at AXA was as a CEO of a big company trying to move away from only focusing on creating shareholder value. And then you mentioned during the questions and the interview section how important it was to you to focus on a client approach, especially as an insurance company. Yet AXA delivers one of the biggest dividend yield of the CAC 40 in France. So do you think this is compatible, or are you trying to move away from this shareholder importance within the company? And my second question is, France is playing against Germany this weekend. Who are you going to support?
So on the first one, I mean, the only reason why the dividend yield is so high is because the share price is so abnormally low. No, but I think it's very much the question of balance. Having only a focus on shareholder will not be possible anymore. You need to balance the interests, but you need to balance it in a way that you don't make stupidities. I think what you cannot do, or what I can't do, what we can't do, is not come next at the end of the year and say, oh, instead of 6 billion profit, it'll be only 3 billion profit. That doesn't fly. What you need to do is you need to try and combine your strategy, which is by nature a profit-oriented strategy, to combine it with societal goals and to make those societal goals core of your strategy. So by not investing into coal anymore, we needed to find valuable alternatives at a similar level of yield in the green energy space, and you will find them. The more you search, the more you find. And to my mind, being socially responsible and profit-oriented are not two different sides of the coin, they are the same sides of a coin. And we have no choice but to go in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Buberl, for the speech and the Q&A. I have a question for the partnership you were talking about with AXA and the consumer. So you said that the consumer is going to enter into the partnership because otherwise he might be not insured. Is it going to be that the partnership is based on controlling instead of like trusting the consumer? So when you, for example, work out, don't drink a lot, don't smoke, that you can afford the health insurance, and if you do smoke and do drink alcohol and probably don't work out, you won't be insured anymore in the future?
I personally would not start the conversation with the customer in that way. I spoke very much about alignment of interest, and a threat is never an alignment of interest. That's why I'm personally not a very big believer in all those devices in the car. When you tell your client every second minute, don't drive so fast, don't brake so fast, don't corner so badly, he or she is not motivated. You need to create an alignment of interest which is based on trust, because we can't measure everything, and which is in the interest of both. And again, I know one side for sure. The customer's interest to avoid a claim is very high, because the hassle of a claim, nobody wants it. And I'm not talking about the paperwork. I'm not talking about waiting for the payment. I'm talking about the hassle of finding the right doctor, finding the right garage, making sure that your business interruption doesn't take long. Nobody wants that. And we also don't want it. It doesn't sound intuitive because our business is paying claims. But if I can avoid paying claims, if I can help the customer, and that is a true answer, we are both better off, even though I will have less revenue afterwards. And this philosophical change of creating a very different relationship with the customer will need time on both sides, but I do believe that the future is there, and to be more meaningful in the customer's life, that is the only way to do it.
Yeah, you'd mentioned in your speech earlier about wanting to help women out in India who are in the agricultural sector. So I wanted to know, what is the financial and the social viability of this, if at all, or is this something you're doing for social reasons?
So we are very active in India. We are active in, we obviously have a big joint venture with Airtel, you know them very well. But we are also extremely engaged in three areas. One is the emerging customer insurance, which is how do we help women entrepreneurs out of poverty. And this is a combined offer between Airtel Payment Bank and AXA, where quite honestly we do not earn a lot of money. In fact, we earn nothing. But you know, the reason is not we don't want to earn money today. We want to accompany these customers on their journey, because what you can see, and Kenya is the example that has the longest history, people who manage to get out of poverty with insurance will rise on the ladder. And I hope that the investment we have made today in those Indians, women and men, will pay out in the future. In the same way, when you come to agriculture, we have the biggest growth this year in India in parametric insurance, where we insure the farms. And certainly outside of the large cities, this is a very, very high need. And again, we are doing this to help. A third area where we are extremely active is in the health system. Nobody knows it really, but we are designing the primary health system and reinsuring the primary health system with many of the Indian states. And obviously it's a fascinating topic where we learn a lot, again, for Europe, because all those solutions need to be very data-driven, need to be extremely simple, need to be extremely digital. And the reason also why we invest is the spillover effect into Europe. What we can learn in India, what we can learn in Africa, what we can learn in Asia is extremely valuable for Europe tomorrow. And that's why it's worth not making a profit today.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for coming today to HEC. You've touched upon the topic in your speech, but I'd like to know what is your opinion on the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have on society in general. There are many divergent views on the topic, and for instance, Laurent Alexandre, famous French businessman, énarque, HEC grad, he thinks that the less educated people in society are going to be completely marginalized. And so would you agree with him? Do you think that artificial intelligence is going to increase inequality between people, or on the opposite, bridge gaps between communities?
I disagree with him, and I shared that disagreement at our last lunch with him.
Okay.
Why do I disagree? I mean, yes, if you look at it from a perspective of a societal perspective, I agree. At first sight, many jobs can be automated and many jobs can be eliminated. And the step up for many people will be quite high. So that hypothesis at first sight makes absolute sense, and this element will be there. The question for me is, and that's where the belief is different, can we overcompensate that loss in new areas and potentials by augmenting the processes that we do today with artificial intelligence? And I do believe that there is much more of a purpose and much more of a potential of helping existing work to be augmented, to be simplified, really to make sure that those people can do different things and can engage more with the customer. So to give you an example, take a doctor. A doctor today has many routine tasks and is often very pressed because many customers, a lot of queues. If he or she has an aide tomorrow to help to facilitate the decision, or even to fill in all the questionnaires and the question in the waiting room, he or she can focus herself much more on the patient, can see very different things. And for me, to help people to focus more on the customer interaction, to focus more on the complex tasks that we can't do today because we have to have the pain of doing those repetitive tasks, for me is a relief for many people and is a potential that will be much larger than the jobs lost. Because on the jobs lost, what percentage of your job of today will be taken away by artificial intelligence? The jobs today are composed of very, very different tasks. So maybe 10% of your job is automated, or 20%. It's very difficult still with 20% to replace you, because you've got 80% that you are still doing. And so my view is very much let's not move the 20% to 100%, let's rather take the 80% and fill it back up to 100% with more meaningful tasks. There is, however, one thing on artificial intelligence where I have very cautious eyes, which is the question of, can we still control the automation? And is the automation that we put into those machines too biased and still and unethical? And this question for me is the far more important question, where there is no solution today. How can we make sure that those algorithms do not become a black box? And how can we make sure that they take decisions that we want to be taken beyond our normal biases?
Firstly, thank you very much for coming in today. You talked a lot about long-term thinking and sustainability and how we should not blame the politicians. But to what extent do you weigh in or even consider the political environment, for example, Trump going out of the Paris Climate Agreement?
So I didn't say we shouldn't blame the politicians. If the politicians have done a lousy job, we should blame them. What I'm saying is we should not load all the responsibility on the politicians. There's a lot that companies can do together with the politicians. Now, coming to your question on Trump, what we see with populism, with the arrival of Trump, is not an accident. And when Trump is not re-elected or will step down after 8 years, it will not be gone. This is a phenomenon that has been brewing up for a long time in our societies, since the financial crisis, because that's where it started. And let's be honest, we all have not done our job in making sure that we learn from the financial crisis and giving people a new vision again, and giving people also an opportunity to participate in the new prosperity. We have failed altogether, and that's why I believe it is now up to all of us, politicians and companies and entrepreneurs, to get it right again. If we want to avoid that the world order that we have enjoyed for so many years is breaking apart in small pieces again, that we become far more nationalistic and are much more protagonistic, we need to make sure that we fight against it and that we take our share of the responsibility. Take Brexit. To my mind, people have not gone to the real reason. Why have the British voters voted for Brexit? Not because they are crazy, not because the UK government doesn't work, because they have a serious issue with how Brussels is working. Have you ever heard, after the Brexit votum, anything about the fact how Brussels can be renewed and reinvent themselves in order to address these issues? I have heard nothing. And so we should not blame populism. We should not push it under the carpet. It is a reality. And if we don't understand, if we don't engage, we will not solve this problem.
Hi, I have a question about AXA's position concerning global warming. So we've had a really tough summer. We've seen large parts of California, of Portugal, go up in flames, droughts and heat waves here in France. And this is definitely, long-term risk for the insurance industry as a whole and to AXA. And so how do you hedge the potential devastating losses that such catastrophic natural events could cause on the communities that you're insuring?
Again, there's three ways of doing it. The first one is, what I said earlier, you need to decide where do you invest and where do you not invest. And we were one of the very first ones, and you've seen AXA being extremely active last November on in the Paris Climate Summit, to really push for the exit from coal, and also to push for the accounting measures in the Task Force of Financial Disclosure, where we really pushed for a disclosure of investment into stranded technology. So there is a big part where we can help, where we can engage, but it also requires that our competitors are following. And it's always the same pattern, the same with tobacco. At the beginning, you are all alone, and soon competitors are following, which is great. The second part is the question on what can we do against the warming and how can we position ourselves in that space. And as I said earlier, we are insuring today only a small portion of these insurable risks. The protection gap today is 100 billion. Most people are not insured, and certainly in emerging countries where those issues do happen, and also many states are not insured. However, there is mechanisms of getting there. I was in Colombia the other day, and we were talking with the ex-president of how they can insure their own earthquake risk, their own climate change risk. And there are market solutions. There is a market called insurance-linked securities where you can offer those risks to the market that are, by the way, very well diversified. So, and that's the third piece for us. When we look at those risks, we look very carefully, what do we want to have in our own balance sheet, and where would we rather want to find a solution in the market. So there is ways of, on the one hand, stopping that we go beyond 2 degrees of global warming, but there is also another way of ensuring better the risks that are not covered today.
Because we only have limited time, we will only be able to take 2 more questions. Thank you.
Hello, I have a question. Seeing that AXA has major financial operations in London, how are you preparing for Brexit? And keeping in mind that the expiration is only a few months away, and we really don't have much of answers as to what's going to happen.
So obviously, Brexit for us is an important topic. We have to differentiate. So we are a very big actor in the UK, and for the local business, not much will change. We are the number 2 in the health business and the number 2 in the insurance of companies. This is the local business where we will continue prospering, where we will continue to invest, because Brexit as such is not touched by it. Yes, those companies will suffer from Brexit, but the core of the UK economy will continue to prosper. And if you look, if there's one element of the UK economy in the past that has always made them prosper, it is their ability to adapt quickly. And we were investing heavily in London in the real estate, and the question came up, should we continue or not? We continued because there was a very clear element of this fast adaptation. Then you have the international part, where obviously we need to see what it means. And international for us is the truly international operations. So some of our Africa risks are managed there. Some of the investment business is managed there. And obviously there we will slowly take back those people to the continent. Luckily, we've got large operations in the continent. So for us, it's not the question, are we going to Luxembourg, Paris, or Frankfurt? It is by nature Paris. And then there's another one which is heavily underestimated, which to my mind is the biggest difficulty, which is Ireland and the UK. Because obviously we are in both countries and we have crossover outsourcing. So we have call centers in Ireland for the UK and call centers in the UK for Ireland. And this is probably the most difficult task that we are facing, but personally we are preparing ourselves for a hard Brexit.
Hey, last question. So you said you needed to measure everything, all your decisions, and then at the same time you said that you moved out of insuring coals because of, I think, your moral understanding. So how did you quantify your benefits from withdrawing from coal, and what arguments convinced your shareholders or your stakeholders? So what line of argumentation did finally work for you?
So first of all, I mean, it is true we do measure. When you measure in terms of yield, so what is the alternative investment giving you? It is very difficult to match the investment in coal. So on this one, we clearly measure a slight loss. But I can tell you that we have found quite a few interesting opportunities in the green energy that have very similar yields. So this is the one piece on the investing. The second piece is obviously the question on what does it mean? Because if we don't insure coal plants anymore, if we don't invest into coal plants anymore, and if most of our competitors do it in the same way, we see that the coal output is going down. And you can see that and measure that in many countries, certainly in the developed world, where you see that the energy shift is actually happening. And by shifting the investments, companies have no other choice but to follow. And certainly more long term, where we will see it, is also on the health of our customers, having less pollution, having less CO2, but this is something that you will only see in the long term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buberl, for answering all our questions. Thank you to all of you for your participation. Thank you to the HEC Débats team for moderating this debate. I'm sure we all learned something today, and we hope to see you all very soon to our further conferences. Thank you very much.
Thank you.